It's a great pleasure for me to welcome the Vice President of the United States, Mr. Joe Biden.
Great to be here.
I'm very glad to see you again. We've met sometimes before, but mostly in Washington. We almost met in Serbia the other week, but we didn't do that. But in Washington recently in May at the U.S. Nordic Summit, when we were invited by President Obama, and also more than a year ago, we had a quite long talk at the time. You were very generous with your time, so it's an honor to have you here in Stockholm, Mr. Biden. We have completed substantial talks on bilateral issues, but also on global challenges, and the talks, the discussion we have had reminds me once again how excellent the U.S. and Swedish relations are, and I think I can say that they are perhaps stronger than ever, and we are very glad for that. We will continue to deepen our close cooperation. Our two countries share many common interests, as well as the ambition to show leadership on global challenges. We have especially talked about the global refugee crisis and how to create sustainable conditions for peace and security around the world. On September the 20th, I will participate in the Leaders' Summit on Refugees in New York, hosted by President Obama, with Sweden as co-host. And that summit aims to strengthen refugee protection around the world. In order to do that, more countries must contribute and assistance must increase. We need shared responsibility in the European Union, of course, but also shared responsibility globally, because no country, no region, no continent, no organization can handle this alone. The global refugee crisis can only be solved with global solutions. We're also determined to work together for peace and security, not least now when Sweden is taking the non-permanent seat in the UN Security Council. We stand firm in our resolve to counter terrorism, to counter extremism, and to continue the work in the coalition against Daesh. I believe that the transatlantic link is more important than ever. It is definitely key in responding to challenges to European and global security. We have discussed energy security, in particular different concerns regarding the Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline, and we must ensure that the interests of the European Union, its neighboring states, are protected in legal, security, and political terms. I can also say that I'm delighted that you have assured that you will try to participate, you want to participate in the Global Deal initiative and that project. Global Deal is a vision, a concept for how to create win-win-win situation in a globalized world through governments, employers, trade unions, and others jointly addressing challenges in the global labor market. Because we know that decent work is not only the morally right thing to do, it also spurs productivity and growth. So that is a very important project for me personally, and I'm very glad that you want to participate. We know also that creating good conditions for trade, innovation, new industrialization is equally important, and for us, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP, is therefore vital. Can I finally just say that I'm personally also very pleased that we will increase our cooperation on cancer research, which is a very important area, of course, important sector in which the United States and Sweden are front runners, and we have every reason to keep on working together and exchange knowledge on that, in that area. Please, Mr. Vice President.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for your hospitality and for
for all of your colleagues, all the members of your cabinet administration are here. I appreciate the discussion we had this morning. And it's a real pleasure for not only an American, for a Delawarean to be here in Sweden, because a few years ago I had the great pleasure to host King Carl Gustaf and Queen Sylvia in my home state of Delaware to celebrate the 375th anniversary of the first Swedish colony in the United States of America, in my home state. It is still an area of our state along what they call the Christina River. You'd not be surprised the name of the river. And where Old Swedes Church still resides, and we take great pride in that relationship. As a matter of fact, back in 1782, near the end of the American Revolution, a Swedish minister in Paris sought out Ben Franklin, one of our founding fathers, and he said he wanted to be remembered that, quote, Sweden was the first power in Europe which voluntarily, without solicitation, offered friendship to the United States. And that friendship is still as real and as appreciated as it was way back then. But we Delawareans claim particular kinship with Sweden. You know, this visit comes at the end of a short trip that I've made to the region to visit several of our allies, at first to the Baltic Summit of Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, and then yesterday to Turkey. And Sweden is another very, very important part of in Europe where we get an awful lot done together. And the Prime Minister and I talked about how our nations share extremely strong bonds of kinship, and maybe even more importantly, values. The way we look at the world and our responsibilities around the world. There are more than 4 million Swedish Americans in the United States of America, and Sweden is a leader in the European Union, a staunch partner to the NATO alliance, and a close friend to the United States of America. And we are proud, we were proud to welcome you, Mr. Prime Minister, as part of the Nordic Summit in Washington in May, where we celebrated this integrated partnership between the Nordic nations and the United States. Today, we covered with your ministers and you a broad range of issues where our nations are working side by side to advance a shared vision of how we can be both value-added to the rest of the world, not just to one another, but to the rest of the world. First, we spoke about the commitment of strengthening our interest around the world. Our troops serve together in Afghanistan, where Sweden contributes to NATO Train, Advise, and Assist mission. And as members of the Counter-ISIL Coalition, Sweden's military is helping to train local forces in Iraq so they can bring the fight to ISIL on the ground, those that you are training. And we're united in our commitment to stamp out this evil, which is having a significant impact on a number of things, including immigration flows. And Sweden has shown great leadership. You have shown great leadership, Mr. Prime Minister, and great compassion in providing the critical humanitarian aid and assistance to millions of refugees fleeing violence in Syria and Iraq, and for that matter, Afghanistan. Last year alone, your government pledged $33 million in assistance to Iraq and $41 million in assistance for those purposes in Syria. And as we have an expression in the United States, a slang expression, Sweden punches way above its weight class, and it really does. And you've accepted 163,000 immigrants to Sweden, giving them safe haven, more refugees per capita than any European nation. And we know that is not easy. But it's a reflection of the generosity and the commitment of your people. It is difficult, but it is admired. And one of the reasons for President Obama looking forward to you co-hosting the Leaders' Summit on Refugees, other nations Other nations have to step up. We have contributed a little over $5.1 billion thus far, but the rest of the world has to step up and take on responsibility for these displaced persons. And again, we're looking forward to you co-hosting that initiative next month at the General Assembly. And we hope that more countries are going to follow your example and take on the burden to protect and assist refugees in need. The second thing that we spent some time speaking about was how we strengthen energy security worldwide, but particularly how you do it here in Europe by diversifying energy sources and supplies, increasing connections across Europe, and strengthening the energy markets in Europe. That is a vital economic interest, it's a vital security interest, it's a vital environmental interest. And no country should be able to use energy as a weapon. No country should be able to use energy to coerce policies from other nations or actions. And speaking for ourselves, speaking for the United States, Nord Stream 2 pipeline, we think, is a fundamentally bad deal for Europe. My colleagues joke with me when I say I never tell another man or woman what's in their interest, but I can tell you from our perspective, it looks like a fairly bad deal. And I know you are going to examine it, as the rest of your colleagues in Europe as well. Europe needs diverse sources of gas, not, in our view, new Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And to lock in greater reliance on Russia at this moment, I think risks this. I know it will fundamentally destabilize Ukraine, where you have led in trying to respond to the aggression on the part of Russia and their reluctance to enforce Minsk II, to which they have agreed to thus far. And so, but again, that is a decision for you and your colleagues to make. But, you know, Russian gas can and should be a part of the European market, but that market needs to be open and needs to be competitive. Everyone has to play by the rules. Everyone has to play by the rules. And the time to act is now, because this is a very transformational moment in global energy. This year, for the first ever, shipments of liquefied natural gas from the United States have arrived in Europe, and every country in Europe is now able to, if they choose, to buy natural gas from the United States. It is a judgment. They have the ability to diversify their sources. But it's for all of them to decide. But we have changed, we have altered, we have increased our access to American natural gas. And so we're eager to continue working with our partners to help Europe deal with what the EU decided some 8-10 years ago, an energy policy for Europe. And finally, we spoke about our cooperation to advance other shared values around the world, such as upholding human rights and women's rights. You have been a leader. You, your administration, Sweden has been a leader. You know, there's that expression that I often quote. It's from a Chinese proverb: women hold up half the world. And the failure to engage women in the social and political and economic enterprise of the country is a gigantic, gigantic opportunity lost beyond the human toll that it takes. It is, and your leadership and your cabinet's leadership is important in that area, as well as expanding tolerance and inclusion for all people, the LGBT community, all people in the world are entitled to be treated with dignity, period. Dignity. Everyone is entitled to be treated with dignity, and that's been the hallmark of your country. And also, you've worked very hard, and we've worked together to bolster the rule of law. And so, these are universal values. They belong to all people on earth. And I want to thank the people of Sweden for putting those values, Swedish values, squarely at the center of your foreign policy. That's why the president jokes and kids about how much he enjoys dealing with. If everything was easy as dealing with the Nordic states and the value system you represent, he jokes everything in the world would be better. But I think there's some truth to that. Sweden dedicates the full 1% of its budget, $43 billion, to development aid. This is an incredibly generous commitment, and the United States is proud to be your partner, leading and helping lead in transformative development efforts around the world, from Power Africa to others we could name. It will have long-term consequences on stability, on opportunity in other parts of the world. When our countries work together on these issues and the close coordination that we have, we enhance our individual effectiveness, and quite literally we can begin to change the world a piece at a time. And so, Mr. Prime Minister, there are a few issues on which Sweden and the United States are not in perfect sync. I'm sure there are some, but there are very few, very few. You know, we have a strong, as you said, and growing trade and investment relationship. We're partners in pursuing high standards and comprehensive trade agreements that will bring down trade barriers between Europe and the United States, supporting good jobs. And one of the things that intrigues me the most is your effort at the United Nations. The truth of the matter is that unless and until we find the ability of the global economic system to accommodate good-paying jobs and not have as many losers and winners as exist, having ordinary people seeing that they can, in fact, benefit from globalization, you're going to begin to see, if we don't deal with that, increased resistance around the world to trade and opportunity. You see some of it happening in my country right now. And so your leadership in this issue as a former trade unionist is really very important. And lastly, we talked a little bit about the cancer moonshot. The president asked me to honcho, as we say, take over in the United States. And one of the things that's pleased me the most is the number of countries that have indicated they'd be willing to enter into memorandum of understanding with us on how we collectively promote and expand and speed up the research that's available for cures and turning some cancers into chronic diseases. It requires the world to participate. And so at the United Nations, I'll be meeting with a number of other countries that want to do that with us, and we're working now, your government and ours, on the possibility of a similar memorandum of understanding. And lastly, working together to address climate change, to advancing scientific cooperation is another place where you've led. You have a significant portion of all of your energy needs being met by renewable resources. It is necessary that the world eventually wean itself off of carbon, and you're way ahead of the rest of the world, and the rest of the world can learn a lot from what you're doing. So we're looking forward to continuing to work with you on that scientific cooperation as well. So even though this visit was short, from our perspective at least, Mr. Prime Minister, it was a very important one. And I look forward to continuing my work with you, and the President does as well, Mr. Prime Minister, as we keep strengthening this partnership and find new ways to deliver for both our people, and together deliver to make things better beyond our individual countries in the region and the world. And it's always a great pleasure to be here, and thank you very, very much for your hospitality.
Thank you. Thank you.